Georgia wasn't the only special election tonight. Voters in South Carolina have elected Republican Ralph Norman over his Democrat challenger Archie Parnell. Norman spoke to his supporters a short time ago.
Folks, the people of 5th District decided to send a loud message, and that they did today. I think that message is this. It's time to govern. It's time to get things done. It's time to go to work. With everybody pulling together, we can make this country as great as we can make it. We can make it a reality now, and I want to go to Washington, D.C. to make that a reality.
Norman fills the seat vacated by the president's budget director, Mick Mulvaney. Let's turn back to the Georgia special election now, get some analysis. Greg Bluestein is the political reporter for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. He's in Atlanta tonight. Shelby Holliday is politics reporter for the Wall Street Journal. She's in New York, and here in Washington, Chris Steyerwalt. Greg, I want to start with you. Surprised the results tonight? Did you see this closing in the last few days?
We saw a closing, but we didn't realize it would be this wide of a margin for Karen Handel. I mean, this looked much easier than it really seemed out there in the field. Every poll showed it razor thin, and it was not even close by the end of it. I mean, this was a 6-point margin where Jon Ossoff wasn't able to really improve on Hillary Clinton's margin in Georgia.
So is this a situation where the polls are wrong again?
Well, now, wait a minute.
All right, I'm just asking.
I'm just saying that the poll, we did see that the late polls showed, we don't care about the top line number as much as we care about the movement. And in the closing weeks, the movement for Karen Handel was clear. She was closing the gap. As the focus on this race came down to this being cast as make or break, do or die. If Republicans lose this, then their party will be exploded by nuclear bombs and cast into the abyss, and it will all be over for them and they'll die. Then Republicans said, well, I guess we better go vote. What Republicans really wanted, or what Democrats really wanted, was to try to sneak up on them like they did in South Carolina. Isn't it funny that the race that got $50 million poured into it, celebrity endorsements, robocalls, full freak out, was a much wider margin than the one that was in South Carolina that had half the number of voters and was significantly closer?
Shelby, what turns this race?
Well, you guys can debate about the polls all night. We can all debate about them. But this does resemble 2016 in a lot of different ways. The polls were a bit off. Ground game didn't matter as much as everyone thought it did. Money and enthusiasm did not ultimately turn into votes for Democrat Jon Ossoff. You know, some of it had to do with the fact that he's a 30-year-old political novice. He didn't have a record. There was a lot of talk in the district about what he really did stand for, despite the fact that he was running on this moderate, fiscally conservative platform. But I think Karen Handel going to Washington is not just a win for Karen Handel. It's a huge win for the White House, a big win for Paul Ryan. And in Karen Handel, Republicans now have yet another House member who is fiscally conservative, who shares their conservative social values, also wants to build a wall on the southern border. She wants to repeal and replace Obamacare. I spoke to her last week when I was in Georgia. She said she does not necessarily support the border adjustment tax, which is the subject of much debate in the House, but she is firmly behind a lot of the policies that President Trump is trying to put forth. And, you know, this is a huge win across the board. And as we were talking about, this is a sweep for Republicans. You cannot understate just the depression that Democrats now face. And they're also torn between what kind of candidate they should run in the midterms, what kind of issues they should run on. Instead of having a clearer map for the midterms, there's now just a whole lot of confusion for the Democratic Party.
Greg, as much as we talk about, for all of the time it's spent talking in the media about a split in the Republican Party, that some like Trump and the Trump agenda, some others don't and are standing up to him, this seems like it is clear indication of a split in the Democratic Party, and that Ossoff couldn't find whether to be a moderate or to embrace the national, furor in the Democratic Party, which is coming from the left of the party.
Yeah, there's already second guessing among Democrats I've talked to about his message, because he didn't overtly attack, near the end of the campaign at least, overtly attack Donald Trump when Trump would come visit, or when Mike Pence visited. He largely refrained from attacking, just saying he doesn't want to weigh in on national figures coming in from Washington. There's already Democrats here who said if he'd only gotten a little edgier, maybe it would have worked for him. I don't know. It didn't look like anything would have worked for him in this district with the results that we saw tonight. night.
Yeah, okay, so translate that here in Washington. You said Paul Ryan is extremely happy tonight. As they have now a health care bill that we haven't really seen, we expect to see Thursday on the Senate side.
The showroom model.
Yeah, the showroom model. They may get a little wind at their back, perhaps, on the Trump agenda with this win.
Or at least get out of the giant wind tunnel that was blowing in their face. The headwinds that Republicans are facing are real. We shouldn't pretend that they aren't facing serious challenges. Every party that holds the White House faces challenges in the first midterm. Except for in 2002, that's just what history says. So Republicans do have headwinds, and they're increased by the fact that the president is not that popular right now. All that having been said, if that check mark was on the other box, what Paul Ryan would be facing tomorrow, what Mitch McConnell would be facing tomorrow in the Senate would be revolt. They would both be facing members who said, oh yeah, you want me to stand around next to you and wait for the steamroller to come in and squash me? I'm not doing it. I'm going off on my own. This buys them time that they need between now and the end of August to try to put together a package and try to get some legislation done.
Shelby, what's your bet that we see the stories tomorrow and they say, well, this was a Republican district and was held by Republicans since 1979, and the margin was less than it was going to be, both in South Carolina and Georgia, and that's the focus, and not this is a big win for the president?
I'm sure we'll see those headlines, but I have to say, being on the ground and talking to voters this past week, everyone said this is, in fact, a referendum on Donald Trump. Republicans wanted to send someone to Washington to support him. Democrats wanted to block that, of course, claim this big, sweet revenge victory in their backyards. This is about the president. You know, a lot of people are saying it's about health care. It's really not. It's an affluent district. People have health care. They don't have as much at stake when it comes to their own health care. They were far more worried when I spoke to them about government spending, and they're frustrated with the turmoil in Washington. Donald Trump is not a particularly popular figure in this district, but this was a referendum, and this is a victory for the White House, make no mistake.
Greg, earlier I said 5-0. President Trump obviously had the biggest surprise victory, but of the contested special congressional elections, Republicans are 4-0 with Montana, Kansas, South Carolina, and Georgia. They did pick up one to replace Javier Becerra, which was not a surprise in California. But Greg, put it in perspective for Georgia, what that state looks like. Is it now more contested for Democrats even after this loss with Jon Ossoff? I mean, there was talk that Hillary Clinton wanted to look at Georgia, but it seems like the old days of Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania when Democrats are looking to states that really are Republican at their heart.
Yeah, I mean, Democrats hope that an Ossoff victory would have given them a path that flipped wealthy suburban, conservative-leaning districts like this one, and he didn't. And so where he stands in Georgia, and where the situation stands in states like in places like Orange County, California, and suburban New York districts that Republicans are trying to flip, it makes this sort of centrist message all the more difficult to sell. And in Georgia, which has been reliably Republican for decades now, Republicans control every statewide office and a commanding majority of the state legislature. It makes it a lot harder for Democrats, especially newcomers like Jon Ossoff, to come from out of nowhere to make a real challenge in these districts.
Most expensive House race in history, $150 to $250 per vote. As we look at it, Shelby, Greg, and Chris, thank you very much.